Hello everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are ready for some really interesting, thought-provoking conversations today. Just forewarning, there may be some topics that we talk about in this particular video that some people may not agree with. I'm totally anticipating that. It's fine, but I have to kind of start with that before I get into my presentation. But it's very much about the particular aspect that we're going to be discussing today. Those of you guys who are aware, you know, Mercury's still retrograde. It's going to be retrograde for a little bit longer in the sign of Capricorn. Mars in this next week is just getting ready to go direct. So planets are extra spicy. And today I want to talk to you guys about an aspect that I don't talk about entirely too much. I don't do full-blown videos on it. I touched on it a little bit during my Mercury retrograde video, but we're going to talk all about the Mercury in conjunct to Mars transit. Yeah, not widely spoken about, but there's a lot of things going on while both Mercury and Mars are getting ready to go direct. And I think it's bringing up a wide variety of different topics that people are holding back from communicating and talking about, but more importantly, the responsibility of speaking up, and also the responsibility of being able to ask, you know, who's in charge, who's running the show, who's responsible for this. And I think we're going to see some of the themes that I'm going to be talking about today kind of coming up out in the world and in the media. Those of you guys who are members of mine and subscribers, thank you guys for supporting me. Thanks for coming back. If you're new to my channel, and there is a lot of you, welcome. My name is Candice Marie. I'm a Western astrologer with a focus in working with the Sabian Symbols as well as tarot during my personal one-on-one sessions. And yeah, once again, another kind of different video than what we're usually doing, but I've been feeling kind of inspired with the Mercury retrograde, and in particular this inconjunct, to dig a little bit more deeply into some of the things that are going on in the world right now and talk to you guys about how this very small aspect, which most people will miss, I think is actually very important. If you like my content, please do make sure you're subscribed. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment below. Let me know how you guys are feeling with these energies. How is it affecting you? Please do continue to keep watching this video. Let me know what you think. So let's talk about this Mercury in conjunct to Mars. So we're looking at Mercury, the god of communication, information, anything in regards to also commerce and travel and business. He is retrograde right now, meaning that we are still in the midst of a retrograde cycle. Some of these things are topsy-turvy while Mercury is retrograde. It gives us an opportunity to turn inward, reflect, reorganize, rethink something. And also, while I'm filming this, Mars is still retrograde. But throughout this transit that I'm going to be talking about, Mars will actually be going direct. So when are we going to be feeling Mercury in conjunct Mars? Mercury in Capricorn, Mars in Gemini. We're going to be feeling this from January 14th through the 20th, 2023. So it's really setting up for about a week. I'm putting this out early just so you guys know that this energy is in the skies. So you can be watching for some of these dynamics happening out in the world, or archetypally, perhaps even in your own life. I'm certainly seeing it a lot. And let's start off with just talking about what the inconjunct is, okay? So all signs are going to have two particular signs that are going to inconjunct or quincunx that particular sign. It's not quite an opposition, right? Because an opposition is more relational and you can do both. So the opposition to the opposition to Capricorn would be Cancer. It's not quite a trine, because a trine is free flowing, right? It's that 120-degree angle where, you know, Capricorn would be able to speak sweetly with Taurus, and it'd be able to speak sweetly with Virgo. So it's kind of like in between an opposition and a trine. Now, the inconjunct, also known as the quincunx, represents that one sign, one of two actually. So, you know, we also see Capricorn has this with Leo as well, but the one sign that rubs it kind of the wrong way, right? So it's like the itch that you can't scratch. It's something that's uncomfortable. It's creating friction and kind of rubbing each other back and forth. So you want to just take into consideration that aspect of just something that's trying to reconcile and work itself out. So it's causing some friction. Then you want to take into consideration what the planets are that are quincunxing each other. So like I said, Mercury, which is the mind, communication, Mars, which is about forward motion, and it's also about defense. It can be about agitation. It can be about cutting, severing, war, passion, anything like that. So we just want to take into consideration that the mind and the drive are rubbing each other the wrong way. Now, when you see this, especially between these two planets, like sparks can literally fly, or figuratively in terms of conversations and communication. So there is like this sense of Mars being like, hurry up, let's go, let's get the word out, let's make that post, let's, jump into that conversation, let's make that kind of like hasty comment or hasty move, especially Mars being in an air sign. And Mercury, also kind of being involved in this inconjunct, talks a lot about, in the sign of Capricorn, responsibility, limitations, boundaries. And while this is setting up over these next few days, both of these planets are still retrograde. So they're getting ready to do something called going direct. This is when a planet goes from being in retrograde motion and it goes direct. So it's very powerful as it's stationing within its degrees. And it's going to be almost a week, right? 6 days from January 14th through the 20th that we are going to see Mercury and Mars quincunx each other at 8 degrees. So if you are somebody who has placements around, let's say 7 to 9 degrees of both Gemini or Capricorn, okay, 7, 8, 9, sun, moon, or rising, Capricorn or Gemini, this is really important. Pay attention. But I feel like actually this aspect, I think it's going to get overlooked a lot by a lot of people. I'm sure there are astrologers out there talking about it. But the more that I look at this, I'm like, this is actually a really big deal. Some of the events, some of the statements, things that are going to be put out in social media, things that may be signed or kind of put out into the media world are going to have an extra bit of spiciness, or it's going to have a little bit of extra kick to it. So just a heads up on that. Remember that retrogrades in general, they are internal. The planets themselves are not actually going backwards. It is from our perspective on Earth that the planet is slowing down and going backwards, when in reality, it's just how we're viewing it, right? So when we think about this, it's a period of shifting direction. So it's not just about going internal. Mercury retrograde can literally materialize as an idea going one way, and then there's a little bit of kind of playing volleyball with something mentally before changing your mind and changing direction, right? So think of Mercury retrogrades as such as like we're changing our mind, which in some cases can actually be really positive. I like Mercury retrogrades. It gives us the opportunity to kind of clean out the cosmic fridge, make sense of things better, kind of communicate and get organized. But it brings up karma. Any retrograde is going to bring up karma, because there's this period of doing the work on an internal level. And we do see in the process of that, sometimes there is a reversal period, or a reversal of things that have been going in a certain direction for one period. We may also see that around the time that a planet is stationing or in shadow as well. So it's not limited purely to just the retrograde. But karmic matters come up. There's reversals that come up. And when planets go direct, that's when you see the full effect of what was done or what was reworked during the retrograde, okay? So not talking so much about the aspect now, I'm just talking about retrogrades in general. Now, when we look at Mercury and Capricorn, this is taking Mercury and placing it in a Saturn-based sign. So real simple astrology, right? Planets are going to bring up a certain archetypal theme, right? I see planets almost as like teachers, and the actual sign is like the subject that they are teaching. So signs are always going to be the film or like the lens that we view a planet through. So if we think of Mercury, right, communication, it can be about organization, documents, speaking, business, anything in regards to systems. being in the sign of Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn, is going to bring up the theme of timing, responsibility, goals, limitations, big business. A lot of us are seeing throughout this retrograde that there's an opportunity for like business negotiations. We're reorganizing something at work, re-strategizing something in regards to our career. You know, the list goes on. Now, out in the world, it's been a lot of like topsy-turvy things with like politics and government and funding and spending and things going kind of back and forth before something is ultimately going to be revealed. Likely either when Mercury goes direct or when Mercury is coming into conjunction with Pluto, which will be in a couple weeks' time. Now, Mars going through its retrograde in the sign of Gemini. We've seen Mars retrograde really since the end of October of 2022. It's just getting ready to go direct in this next week. Much longer period than the Mercury retrograde. Okay, the Mercury retrograde only goes for about 3 weeks in total. So we've seen, or we're going to see, Mars going direct is going to reveal a lot of what's been repressed in terms of being held back, right? Because Mars is like very linear. So when we think of Mercury and Mars together, it's like this pushing the mind, pushing the information, arguing about data, arguing about facts, arguing about sources type of energy. And Mars being retrograde in the sign of Gemini in a Mercury-related sign is all about communication. So in this sign, we see like quick speech, quick words, quick movement, transportation, people being more aggressive within the media, and much more emphasis on our local kind of communities, our local news, also social media, right? Because Gemini is anything that we hold with our hands. So while Mars is going through its retrograde, the dispositor of that particular retrograde, right, the planet that is very much connected to it is Mercury. So we've got this interesting kind of do-si-do that's going on between these two planets, where the inconjunct is them kind of rubbing each other the other way and like trying to kind of see where it can create friction. You add that on top of the fact that Mercury is the person who's hosting the Mars retrograde, and then we're seeing both planets stationing. There is about to be some wild stuff out in the world that's getting ready to kind of be exposed. It's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. Now, Mercury in conjunct Mars can sometimes have this feeling of like getting into arguments and putting our foot in our mouth. Mercury is the kind of the planet that's ruling over this, not just because it rules Gemini, but it's in a higher position in the skies here. So it's also kind of suggesting that there is a sense of domination, that Mercury has more power or more control than Mars. So Mars in Gemini is local authorities. It could be your local communities. It can be driving and transportation. I, for one, have noticed this big time. Like, it doesn't seem to matter where I've been over the last couple of months. It's just like gnarly road construction and delays, and roads are being worked on, and all kinds of stuff is kind of going on like locally. And I, moved like over several states. So I got to kind of drive through a period of other places and just notice that intermittently this was just like a big theme. There's a lot of like delays with Mars retrograde that's going on, with being able to kind of get around. I've heard a lot of people saying they've been having car issues as well. That doesn't surprise me, being that the third house or Gemini deals with vehicles. Slowing down also of like social media sites or communication. That's the other way that we can kind of look at this. But yeah, I mean, I think that this in conjunct, it's very, at least for me, I've felt it in a very kind of agitating way. It's felt very uncomfortable. And so I sat down and I was like, all right, like, what is the purpose of this? What's going on here? And kind of my takeaway was to not be so focused on being able to explain to my audience what the inconjunct is, to use examples. And so I actually kind of stepped away from making this video, and I was like, I'm going to give this some more time. I'm going to wait until Mars gets to closer to 8 degrees while it's stationing. And I'm just going to see like what starts kind of coming up in like the media. So like through, news sources, or what I'm seeing on social media, or what I'm hearing from friends, or what I'm reading in the newspaper, whatever. And so this is the list that I've been kind of compiling, and some of the stuff is kind of heavy, so I apologize in advance. But I think the biggest takeaway for me, and I think this is actually something that I was listening to Russell Brand most recently. It was like, I think it was either yesterday or earlier today. And he did a video where he was basically talking about a war on language. And I think that's so appropriate for this inconjunct because, you know, Mars is in a sign that's associated with communication. It's been retrograde, so it's been held back. It can also talk about cutting or severing or removing things. And that inconjunct to Mercury, who's kind of running the show, is receiving messages from Capricorn related people, right? So like bosses or managers or superiors, you know, people who might be professors or people who might be working for politicians or for, you know, federal government, whatever. It has power here. And so my takeaway from that inconjunct listening to this is like, wow, that's such a great message. Like that's actually something that I don't think people are really like realizing, just how it's become normal to change narratives recently over these last few years, or how easy it is to literally change the meaning of things, right? So I can't go into exact details, but let's just say there's been a number of things that have happened in the medical community in recent years where they're actually physically going in and changing the definition of things to ensure that people are more likely to comply either with mandates or more likely to kind of trust what's being recommended to them, okay? So my take on this is, and I was super, like I said, super inspired by what he had to say. And he went on to kind of talk about how, like, you know, changing of words in a vocabulary sense, like we talk about dictionaries, printed text, all that stuff. Maybe it's just me, but like I remember a time being in school when I was in, you know, middle school or, you know, even going into high school where I physically had to go and get a dictionary, right? I had to get a printed dictionary to look things up. I had to go and use books and I had to reference that information for sources, and they were printed, and usually these are books that had been printed, you know, years prior to me going and referencing them. We now live in the time of the internet where you can go and look on Wikipedia, you can go on dictionary.com, you can go and find all your nouns and your verbs and your adjectives and all that stuff, and you can get all of that stuff, but it can be changed like in the blink of an eye. And so I think the Mercury quincunx Mars, especially as these are stationing, what you're going to hear more about is who's in charge of directing narratives, who's to say what is and is not certain things. And where like draconian powers are literally physically changing the meanings of things on a national and international level to justify upholding or being able to reinforce specific sets of laws or rules, or taking it a step further, exercising a restriction of your free speech, right? So here's some examples I'll give you in just a second. But I think that as Mercury and Mars come on board, we're going to start to see this much more clearly. It's not just going to be like this internal chit chat that's like, wait a second, when did this change? And like, why can't we say that? And like, why is it inappropriate to ask this question, right? So some examples that came up for me that are really big, and this was from that video, is he was talking about how recently in Canada and various other places in the world, they have physically changed the term of violence, right? Which is the reason why I'm bringing this up is that's Mars. And Mars in Gemini is like fighting words. You know, I think I referenced that in my Mars retrograde video. I was like, that's fighting. Them's fighting words sounds like very country western, but whatever. But that's what this is. Mars in Gemini is not necessarily going to fight with its fists. It's going to fight with its mouth. Things that it has to say. So it's going to be quite dangerous with some of the words that can be put out there. And I think it realizes that it can do a lot more damage that way. So if Mars retrograde is to go back, right, and rework or rewrite Gemini, what has been printed, and then the inconjunct to Mercury is like literally they're doing this to be able to justify rules, regulations, and oversight. Okay, so that's one. And the reason why I think this is happening is they're doing this to prevent future protests or limit future protests. Or they're doing this specifically to justify shutting down of protests because they're saying that some exercising of rights or protests are considered violent because of the implications that it may have on the government, on big business, on money, right? And so they're saying like, oh, well, that's violent because you're doing things that could incite violence, or you're doing things that could potentially create some problems that could be financially not ideal for people who are kind of like running the show. So that's one example. Another example, and this is controversial, but I'm going to go there anyway. I'm not here to talk about whether I'm for or against it, but this is quite literal. Mars deals with male sexual organs. Let's just leave it at that. And so I think that Gemini being dual or duality or anything that is kind of changeable or flexible, this is talking about the trans movement. And so I think that when I say the trans movement, not so much people, but more so the concept and the idea of like pronouns, and the fact that Mars has been going retrograde for several months. It's run into several squares to Neptune where there's like a lot of misconceptions or misunderstanding or not understanding like why we're going in that direction. And Mars with the inconjunct to Mercury is literally, we've seen this now, at least here in the United States, on a national level where there is more support towards the LGBTQ community. We're seeing that there is more of an incentive to also feel like we're including those communities. When it comes to education, whether you're for or against it, this is just facts. This has been coming out here recently. And to take it a step further, how words, right, Gemini, and pronouns now simply just justify somebody's gender. Mars retrograde, the inconjunct to Mercury, and where political figures are basically pushing and they're bringing this online and using this as a part of the agenda to say this is like a thing. But for some people, how some corporate companies can now force you to conform to using pronouns, otherwise it affects your employment. And I think that's the Mars in conjunct with Mercury, where Mercury is saying, look, you know, you need to do this, or you need to do this with meetings, or you need to comply, or that needs to be part of your sign off, or, you know, you need to be referring to people with their pronouns, and how that has an impact on your role out in the world in society or within your position within a company, right? Very interesting. I think it's been also to expose the US and various other world governments' involvement of muzzling important topics on Twitter. So we think like the Mars retrograde has definitely played out very much like I thought it would, with a lot of like reworking of social media companies, and Mars hanging out around that 8 degree, and the quincunx will be exact at 8 degrees. I think is going to be exposing something that's a little bit darker, a little bit more sinister. We've seen all kinds of stuff with the Twitter files that have broken out. We've also seen various people come forward from being involved with major news companies that are basically starting to say, yeah, I got fired or I lost my job because I wouldn't continue with a particular narrative. And when I think of like the Mars in conjunct Mercury with who's been in charge, it's who's been at the top that knew this was happening. And where were these tech giants, or where were these CEOs, or where were these companies canoodling and actually working with those in politics, changing and manipulating with Mars square Neptune, things that were being put on media, but also shadow banning, hiding of emails, not allowing things to be heard, and changing the narrative, literally walking back statements on social media. Those who were formerly banned also returning to platforms. That was a huge theme. And so I think it's fair to say, just given the state of Twitter right now, and like the fact that Elon Musk is now taking over, whether you love him or hate him, there's reason for, you know, politicians on both sides of the aisle to be kind of shaking in their boots right now, because he's not really making friends with any one particular side. So I think it's interesting that we have this Mercury retrograde that's in conjunct Mars that's realizing that certain platforms can't be used as a playground to just go out there and send out a bunch of bots and like manipulate certain groups of people in certain places into thinking that something is normal. I think the Mercury in Capricorn wants to focus on like structure and tradition and what's reliable and what is going to be considered appropriate out in the world. And the pressure that it's been applying to Mars is almost, I think it's been like a muzzle for certain for certain people. I said this in a previous video, but like just hearing how Texas is trying to, you know, push legislation to limit social media to anybody who's under 18 years old. I think we're going to hear more incentive. Also, kind of following how they're saying like TikTok is like very much connected to, you know, basically people in other countries or China, you know, using that platform to be able to kind of spy or infiltrate or affect younger people. That's very Gemini, through that particular app in general. Keep in mind that both Mercury, because of its retrograde, and also Mars, because of its retrograde, were set back. So both of them have not made the aspects to Pluto yet. Mercury will eventually come into conjunction to Pluto, and that'll be, I'll look at the date in a second, but I think that's going to be some information kind of coming out right around the time of the new moon in Aquarius. And as we're getting to March, when Mars is getting ready to change signs and finally go into Cancer, we will also see that Mars will square Neptune and it will inconjunct Pluto. So it's safe to say like there's something that's not being released, something that's not being talked about. Certainly noticing this, like just listening to like, you know, various podcasts and like listening to, you know, people in the media who are like, oh, there's certain things we don't talk about. Once again, love him or hate him. Most people hate him, but the whole Andrew Tate thing, really interesting to kind of hear him. He was on a podcast recently, it was like a couple weeks ago, and he was going on about some really controversial topics connected to like Epstein and like, you know, other people connected to that whole storyline. And he was basically saying like, why does nobody want to come out and just like acknowledge the elephant in the room? Like there are certain people within the media who know that you can't talk about these subjects, otherwise you're going to get kind of cut. Right? We've heard this from a variation of people. Kanye was talking about it. I know probably not your guys' favorite person, but it's interesting to kind of hear some of these narratives coming up where really strong Gemini placements are going on and on and on and talking about corruption, talking about the inability to communicate or post or put information out or to be heard, and that it's basically kind of being like swept away or it's being covered up by a higher force, right? Capricorn. And also that it's kind of not getting full visibility or credibility, or it's being kind of just like cast aside as like crazy. And that's because of the squares that we've been seeing to Neptune and Pisces. Now I'm curious also because I feel like there are positive sides to this, right? Like for me, something I've noticed a lot like with clients, and it's also something that I've found myself wanting to do more of. I'm like trying to make more time to do, like cutting back on social media, you know, like Mars and Gemini is all of the apps and the things that you're going through. You know, Capricorn talks about productivity, it talks about work, it talks about getting things done. So I wonder if the quincunx has been like, for some people, reflecting on phone time and just how much time it really takes from us and how it affects our productivity, our goals, and, you know, realizing how much time we spend on there when we could be getting other things done. When we look at the positive aspects that's going on between like Mercury throughout this transit, it is making several trines to the North Node in Taurus, as well as Uranus in Taurus. And so to me, that's kind of saying like new innovative ways to get in the body, to feel like you can be more solid, to learn about more productivity, learning about business, learning about money, learning about health. Mercury can be very connected to health. And maybe spending more time in nature, you know, like reading a book. I mean, it sounds crazy, but like these are things that you can do to combat some of this energy. Now, obviously, another kind of ouch factor is the fact that throughout this retrograde that Mercury is having, Mercury is still forming a square to Chiron in Aries. So that in itself, you know, for me, it makes me feel like the more that I look at that square, the more I realize like it's going to bring up difficult conversations, hurtful words, right? Which we would see with Mercury, quincunx, Mars anyway. But it's going to come up a little bit more where it's a closing square to Chiron and Aries. And it's like where superiors and other people are telling you, you're not enough, you can't, don't waste your time, you're not going to change the system. Really beating down on individuals and making people really feel even less capable than they already did before, right? So, you know, throughout this transit, we're going to see a ton of aspects. I'm going to talk to you guys about these aspects in a second. But just know that this is going to be in play very strongly from January 14th through the 19th, that the inconjunct will be happening, especially on the 20th. And we'll look at that in just a second. I want to read to you guys a couple things before I get into the aspects, and I'll also take you guys through the 12 houses just as a reminder of where this is happening in just a moment. But I want to share with you guys another book. This is Nicola's book. So many of you guys know the late great astrologer Nicola. He was my astrologer, and took some of his classes and studied some of his stuff in his books. And I want to read to you very specifically about 8 degrees, okay? Because this is where we're going to see the inconjunct, and I'm going to show you guys what I'm talking about here. Okay, so it'll be right around the 14th going into the 15th. We're going to see Mercury hit 8 degrees in its retrograde, and Mars is already there. Mars is stationing, so the power and energy of Mars is being felt very strongly right now. Why do I like this book? This is the system that I use for the degree astrology. This is how I learned, and I have found it to be very accurate. So I'm going to read to you 8, which has connections to Scorpio. It doesn't mean it's the 8th house. It doesn't mean Pluto. It doesn't mean Mars. There's just a whole set of words or themes that come up for each and every one of the particular degrees. So it would be 1 through 12 is Aries through Pisces, right? 13 through 24 is Aries through Pisces. So 8 and 20 are both degrees that are associated with Scorpio. And these are word for word. This is in this book. If you guys have it, it's page number 67. Unfortunately, he passed. I heard his wife passed as well, but I think you may still be able to go to his website, and you might be able to support his family and get some of these books if you guys don't already have them. You cannot get this on Amazon. You have to get it through his website. Okay, so 8 degrees is Scorpio. This is what he's got. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there may be something within this list that goes ding, and you're like, yes, I'm seeing that in my life, or like some major kind of theme or trend kind of happens in the world right around this week when these numbers are syncing up. Okay, so at the risk of one's life, okay, life threat, someone who dies or will die during a lifetime, to kill or be killed, assassins, bullies, maniacs, dangerous people, a grave, corpse, skeleton, vicinity of a cemetery, the underground world, operation, surgery, surgeon, operating room, to undergo an operation, to amputate, to cut off lameness, someone else's property, everything belonging to someone else. It's very Scorpio energy. Toilets, restrooms, litter, trash, rubbish, garbage, garbage man, litter can, trash can. Something that's destroyed or decayed, pathology, forensics, abusive language, particularly Mercury at 8 or 20 degrees in Scorpio. So Mercury is going to be an 8, okay? So abusive language, and Mercury, remember, is hosting Mars. Sex, sexually aroused, eroticism, passion, the reproductive organs, the bladder, the rectum, all underground rooms, cellars, basements, subterranean spaces, rivers, areas by the banks, someone else's money, loans, scholarships to borrow money, and treasury, pregnancy, birth, delivery due to pregnancy, okay? Interesting that he says specifically abusive language and words, okay? Mercury at 8 degrees. So we've got Mercury here, once again, in the sign of government, those in charge, those in control, and it's putting pressure in conjunct Mars. Gemini is books, things that are printed. So I genuinely feel that a lot of this in conjunct is about those who are in power, those who are in corporate business, those who are in like government positions, just whatever. They're putting the pressure on this Mars retrograde to go, we're going to change the narrative. We're changing direction. We're changing that word. This word now means this, and this. And if this continues to keep happening in society, right? Bending the truth, manipulating the truth, editing the dictionary, changing things, and no longer having something solid to reference, to go back to, knowing that that is how things are going to be. We're kind of in a bit of a slippery slope here. And I'm concerned for some of the things that are going to be put out into the media during this like 1 week stretch. I'm concerned with some of the decisions that are made secretly. This is happening behind the Sun-Pluto connection. So it really won't be until, you know, Mercury comes back and makes some other inconjuncts to Mars, or Mercury conjuncts Pluto and we realize that this is the new law of the land, or until we start to see that Mars is, you know, starting to make some oppositions once it comes into Cancer. I'm curious what happens when Mars hits about that 8 degrees. So that's Nicola's take, just some food for thought. You might see some of these words or some of these themes getting kind of triggered. I'm particularly curious about a significant, you know, realization or some kind of study that we're seeing, you know, by surgeons or anything of that regard. I'm really curious also about death rates and excessive deaths and fatalities, especially that political figures or governments are aware of, but they're not willing to release that information. You guys might think I'm crazy, but there's like upwards of excessive deaths, like in upwards of 1,000 per week that's being reported in parts of the UK, which is concerning because not many people would think anything of that, but they're basically saying that these numbers are increasing. I don't know why. And Mercury can also deal with the nervous system. It can deal with the mind and like the mental, you know, capabilities. Yes, that has connections also to Uranus, but you're seeing that Mercury is in a trine throughout that period, right? Okay, so let's now look at the aspects, and then I want to talk to you guys about the Sabian symbols. So particularly the aspects, let's start around the 12th. When this starts setting up. All right, so it's going to be sometime, let's see, what do my notes say? Mars wakes up and goes direct on the 12th, okay? So that's when the Mars retrograde ends. It's going to take a couple days. I mean, I think Mars is going to sit at that degree for actually almost several weeks. So until Mars wakes up and starts, you know, moving forward in degrees, we're not really going to feel like we're able to kind of make forward motion quite yet, especially as Mercury's in conjunct Mars, because it's not really helping us because Mars is kind of fueling off of this Mercury retrograde. So Mars wakes up and it goes direct. So we're going to see opportunities to bring back conversations, communicate more, share more, move around more. We're going to feel like the heat and the motivation just kind of turns back on, okay? So then on the 14th, Mercury retrograde will inconjunct Mars. That's going to be, oops, there we go, here. And that'll be when it hits 8 degrees. So that's going to start in the evening. So you might not see that more to the 15th, but it will be officially on January 14th that both of these are at 8 degrees, so it's creating the exact inconjunct, okay? Now it'll be the 14th through the 20th that it will be inconjunct, and this is because Mercury is getting ready to station. So the Mercury retrograde is still happening. It's going to sit at 8 degrees. And I'm really, I mean, obviously the entire time period, the 14th through the 20th is when you're going to see this happening. But I'm really focusing on this particular day on the 20th. The 19th even going into the 20th, because look at this. So you see the moon in Capricorn, it's in its fall. So the moon is coming into conjunction with Mercury, which means like now Mercury is direct. The moon is about what's going on like with everyone, like what the mood in the air is. Moon Mercury is communicating moods, but when it's in Capricorn, it's like, oh, like, you know, this is really difficult to communicate. This is difficult to get out. Or there is some like crystallization going on and like not feeling like we're capable of being able to like share that information. Both the moon and Mercury will inconjunct Mars, which is saying like we have to do more work mentally and verbally to kind of come out with something, to speak up about something. Just so happens it's right around the same time period that the Sun and Pluto are conjuncting. This will be the last Sun-Pluto conjunction before Pluto goes into Aquarius. Yes, you'll see another one in Capricorn, but for right now, This is the first one before Pluto ingresses, and it's in the late degrees of Capricorn, that 28, 29 degrees. So we're going to feel like a final push. And this is going to be during a balsamic moon. So this is right before we have that new moon in Aquarius, like 2 days later. So what am I getting at? Like, you're not going to not feel the effects of the Mercury-Mars retrograde. Like, you're going to feel it. Even though Mercury is direct and Mars is direct, now it's saying wherever there has been subconscious frustration, wherever there's been some conversation you've been holding back and having, or something you've been thinking about, but you don't want to question it, conversations you've been meaning to have with another person at work or in regards to responsibility or timing. Maybe there's been some fear of authority, you know, like questioning whether or not you have the right to ask a question, or questioning whether or not it's a good idea to approach your boss or talk to your dad about this difficult situation. Like this transit is going to bring it all out in the open, right? And as the moon, Mercury, and Pluto are all 12th house to the sun, this is going to get really kind of dark here as the moon approaches Pluto. And then we're going to have that new moon in Aquarius. So really watching the 14th, really all the way up until like the 21st. For those of you guys who are watching, like this is the time where if you don't know what the Mercury retrograde was about, if you don't know what the Mars retrograde was about, now you're about to figure it out. And now that these planets are direct, you have no other choice but to kind of like deal with it head on. Even though it's difficult conversations, the square is to Chiron. Even though some of us might question, well, I'm afraid to stand up to my employer. I'm afraid to, tell, this person who is a superior in society, no. I'm afraid to, take responsibility. I think a lot of this is going to be about challenging authority though, right? Because Chiron and Mars are down here and they are beneath Mercury. So that tells me that there's somebody who feels like they have words or, conversations or sway or power that they are imposing on the little people, Aries and Gemini, and making decisions for people about, global control, rules, regulations, limitation. That is going to impact individuals, and it's going to impact our ability to communicate, perhaps even move around. Now, the aspects that are going to be taking place are very interesting in my mind. Let me show you why. They're very interesting because, like I said, not only do both of these planets come online, so they're both going to wake up. So that means that we're going to feel kind of like energetically, and we'll see this play out archetypally in the world, that there's just going to be more communication about Mars-related things. So we're going to hear more about potential threats of war. We're going to hear more about, people not agreeing and being able to reach out across the aisle. We're hearing more about conflicts and fight in government. I mean, it's just kind of in the air, But the yod that's taking place between Mercury and Capricorn and the South Node. All right. So let me declutter this so you guys can see a little bit better what I'm talking about. And I will probably leave this because I'm going to take it through the 12 signs just to make it easier for you guys. There we go. So what I'm talking about is Mercury in a sextile to the South Node. Yes, I know I spoke about this during my Mars retrograde, but I really want to drive this point home because this is really important. Mercury sextile to the South Node. So what this is basically doing is it's giving us the opportunity to build more solid mental foundations or have more solid opportunities to communicate and have things that we can agree on when it comes to control, when it comes to responsibility. The fact that it's, third house from the South Node talks about having those difficult conversations and agreeing to timelines and signing contracts and accountability, right? Accountability is a huge thing. People on a personal level taking accountability for the things that they say and the things that they do, but also for responsibility. If you say that you care about something, if you say that something is your priority, then you're going to actually do it. So as Mercury sextiles the South Node, as a result of detoxing and letting go and decluttering, or even just getting it out there, we have the opportunity to really focus on, talking about the things that we need to talk about. Then we're also going to see that as this is setting up, it's creating the yod. So the focal point is down here, okay? So whenever you have a sextile, and then there's a planet that is the point, that's the yod. So what is this doing? It's putting the focus on Mars, basically. That's really what it's doing. It's saying, hey, Mars is the focus here. The way out of the frustration, the way out of dealing with the clearing, the way to get clarity about responsibility and limitations and control is to do Mars-related things. Sometimes a good argument is good to clear the air because it gets everything out and you can hash it out. Sometimes a little bit of fierceness and courageousness and the willingness to speak up may actually clear and kind of drain out some of this more negative and controlling or manipulative behavior, especially mentally, okay? Mercury in Capricorn is like, it's a great negotiator. It's great for business. There can be this sense of being like, hey, I know how to problem solve, like, and then it's pushing on Mars to be like, hurry up, let's get on a call, let's sign this paper, let's have a meeting, let's negotiate. But there's another side to this, and this is more the sextile between the South Node and Mercury, and that's like the, oh my goodness, this is not going to be good for business, or this is not going to, make us any money, or this is going to limit our ability to have control. So quick, Quincunx Mars, start an argument, create distraction, cause a problem, do something that's going to be able to help us kind of focus on having control and the ability to kind of manipulate, unfortunately, because the sextile to the South Node. It does have this feeling of also talking about loss and talking about letting go. So I think that a lot of this is going to be about those in charge owning up to and talking about and owning the fact that a lot of people have lost their freedom when it comes to communication. They haven't felt heard. Owning up to and acknowledging, some kind of data, could be Gemini because it's a Mercury related sign. In regards to Mars-related things. So whether this is athletes, if this is younger children, Gemini, if this is, acknowledging things that are being reported on. I mean, Mars and Gemini has been so great for like getting independent, aggressive, on the ground people out there who are doing their research. And yeah, some of these people have been younger people. Some of these people have been on social media. Some of these people have been independent. But these are the people who are pushing and wanting to have conversations. And what I love about Mars and Gemini is I feel like it's very inquisitive and it asks a lot of questions. So I'm really going to be watching in the news over the next week where you have these young, hungry, people out in the media, these journalists who are going to put people on the spot, especially perhaps during some of the White House briefings, perhaps during some of the Fed meetings, and ask some really hard-nosed questions and want to get something on record and be like, can you give us an answer and can we, hold you to this? That's probably going to take some people off guard, and they're not going to be too thrilled about it. We also see, I got to add Jupiter here, that there's another yod involving Jupiter. And this is between Mars and Jupiter. Okay, so we're seeing Jupiter coming into a sextile with Mars. It's within about 5 degrees, but it's still felt. So Jupiter in Aries, independence, optimism, personal expansion, the willingness to be courageous, to travel, by oneself, to learn about health and fitness. Once again, this is still athletes because it's in a Mars-related sign, so international. As it sextiles Mars, I mean, this has literally been materializing, and I said this in my last video, but I can't go on social media without seeing all these videos of people playing soccer, collapsing. And there's been this whole thing in the media talking about this most recent football game where that, unfortunately, the football player got hit very hard with somebody who hit with their helmet to his chest, and he went into cardiac arrest, right? So this theme of impact and what we're learning about impact and how it's impacting the media, Mars. The Mars-Jupiter sextile really isn't bad. It expands courage and it's going to bring a lot of action. It's going to bring a lot of media. It's going to bring it very quickly. And people are going to be very passionate about what they're talking about. And it's also forming an inconjunct, creating a yod to the south node. So in my mind, when I was first looking at this, I was looking at Mercury sextile the south node, and I was like, oh, Mars is the answer. Mars waking up is really going to add this extra boost to this yod, and it's also going to wake up Mercury. And then the more that I looked at it, I was like, holy cow. And there's another one, which is the south node. And while the south node is not a planet, it's still making that quincunx. And what is it ruled by? Mars. So Mars is really, really important right now. And I think that Mercury creating the inconjunct through its retrograde is certain people wanting to hold things back because it may infuriate Mars, right? So that's kind of like my hot take on a lot of what's going on. Personally, if you're like, how does this affect me? Because I do some of these videos, obviously weekly and monthly, to kind of help guide everybody. But I think this is the bigger topic in this week is, where are there things going on that you're afraid to talk about? And you don't want to ruffle feathers, and you don't want to disrupt things and like upset people, and it may not feel like it's the best time, or you feel like you have questions, but it's not okay to ask. That's where we're going to be feeling this pressure throughout this week. And you want to be looking at the south node, or where Scorpio is in your chart, Mars, or where Gemini is in your chart, and Mercury, or where Capricorn is in your chart, to get a fuller picture. I feel like both Mars and the south node are incredibly important, but really they're saying the same thing. If we were to break this down even further though, like let's say I were to add Pluto, because that also rules the south node. If we were to add that and watch, now I got to add them all. Okay. If we were to add that and watch for when Mercury conjuncts Pluto, I bet you dollars to donuts we're going to see some similar stuff. Or when the sun conjuncts Pluto, because that's still highlighting the south node. Okay, so that's as the moon is coming through. It's going to inconjunct Mars, so that sun Pluto is really highlighting the south node. What needs to die, what needs to be let go of, what we're losing control of, what we're releasing, or where there's too much power and ego control stuff going on. And then when we see Mercury come into conjunction with Pluto, okay, then we're going to see Mars trine the moon. But still, while Mercury is conjunct Pluto, within a degree, the moon goes into Scorpio, and it's gonna hit this again. So then in early February, I'm looking at this day, the 12th, when the moon goes into Scorpio, when it sextiles Pluto, which is important because it's the ruler, and it inconjuncts Mars. Mars is so important, man. Guys, even when Mars goes direct, we're gonna be in the shadow until March. So there's still some funky energies that's gonna be setting up, and we're still yet to see the real true effects. If you guys saw my video yesterday, you saw there was 3 Mars returns that took place in the US chart in the 7th house. So having conflict with foreign enemies, or having conflict with the media, however you interpret this. But there's definitely some really significant stuff that's going to be setting up. But for you guys in general, right, just realize that there's a real emphasis on the south node and Mars right now. So don't get too caught up in the Mercury retrograde. Realize that the frustration of the Mercury retrograde is reinforcing the Mars retrograde. I'm going to show you guys where this is taking place for each and every one of the 12 signs. Let me do that so you guys can get an idea of what's going on. And I'm just going to show you Mercury, Mars, and the nodes, because I don't want to confuse you guys. And I already did a video on this, the Mars retrograde, so I don't want to beat a dead horse. All right, so let's change this, turn this to whole sign. And I just have like a little prompt for everybody. Oh, actually, let me read the Sabian Symbols. I almost forgot. Total Mercury retrograde moment. Let me read you guys the Sabian Symbols really quick, and then we'll get to this. For the degrees, we're going to do 8 degrees because Mars is retrograding back, Mercury's retrograding back. Let's read 8 degrees of Gemini. 8 degrees of Capricorn. I'm positive I've read this 8 degrees of Gemini a couple times. You guys should know it by now. It should be like the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll read it anyway. That's fine. All right, so 8 degrees of Gemini. Protest is the key word. An industrial strike. The theme is a call for change. The symbol speaks to the necessity that individuals act in their own best interest and do whatever is necessary to extricate themselves from situations that provide no opportunity for personal growth. This image is an industrial strike is another of the reverse symbols, and it emphasizes disruption, uncertainty, instability, change as change agents that brings about reorganization, restructuring of the establishment of a new order. On a practical level, the degree challenges the seeker to do something about it if he isn't satisfied with his life. The reference is the dignity of personality in the 1953 commentary alludes to the difference between being useful and being used. Having the courage to do what is necessary to maintain personal dignity while at the same time respecting the dignity of others. At its highest, the symbol represents strength of character, assertiveness, courage, and the refusal to sacrifice principles for short-term comfort. Watch for giving up too easily or selling yourself short in order to avoid struggle of confrontation. Today, the accent is on dissatisfaction. You may be feeling that you're being taken advantage of in some way and decide to put your foot down. Your greatest advantage lies in standing in the principle and saying what is on your mind. If you feel trapped in some situation, do something about it. Guard against going against your better judgment, avoiding to close your eyes to reality, or adopting long-term suffering attitude to escape confrontation. Stepping stones, protest, self-assertion, disruption, challenge, demonstration, disapproval, grievance, objection, outcry, and resistance or compliant. Wow. I don't think I need to say anything. Personally, I don't think I need to say anything. I think that really speaks for itself. And I think that in so many ways, the lesson just between archetypally Gemini and Capricorn is like, are you just going to shut up because you're being told to shut up and just get with the program? Or are you going to just continue on? Because doing so and being compliant in some certain situations might make everything go more smoothly, but just getting in line, and if enough people just do that, it's a slippery slope. That's it. That's all I really have to say about that. Let's look at Capricorn 9. Capricorn 9. Here we go. An angel carrying a harp. The keyword is attunement. The theme is inspiration. The symbol speaks to the cosmic symphony behind all manifestations and the fact that a truly inspired individual recognizes no limitation. The image of an angel carrying a harp suggests a sympathetic attunement to a spiritual source, a purity of the heart, and a natural inclination to seek the highest good in any situation. On a practical level, the image alludes to divine protection, a charmed life, and divine protection, a charmed life, and the ability to maintain in a positive and optimistic attitude, even in the most trying situations. At its highest, the symbol represents joy and self-fulfillment through inspiring others to achieve their hopes and dreams. Watch for self-deception, disillusions of power. The accent is on healing and harmony. You may feel serene, protected, and safe from all harm today. Your greatest advantage lies in tuning into what others need for encouragement, inspiring them to move forward. Make peace today. Guard against developing a messiah complex and trying to save the world and everyone from the consequences of their own actions and the experience they need to grow. Stepping stones would be healing, harmony, accord, peace, composure, serenity, tranquility, inspiration, encouragement, and protection. So where that's at odds with speaking out, with saying something, it's like, oh, I could see this can be good. It can be saying that this has the opportunity to trump that. But I also see this as not reconciling, like where that's not setting right in the mind, where if you're being told, basically like everything's fine, everything's coming together, everything's good, like just move forward. Like that's not setting right with some people. So I could see where that's kind of representing that inconjunct, perhaps. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So let's go through the 12 signs. Let's take a look and see. I have a little bit of advice for each and every one of you guys. Let me make the quincunx more obvious. There we go. Okay. All right. So this is going to be me talking to you guys about this inconjunct and what to really look at. So like I said before, the south node is important. Okay. But I'm really focusing on Mars and where Mars is that main point for you. So if you pull out your chart right now, identify where Gemini, Scorpio, and Capricorn is. And I'm going to talk to you guys about, I'll show you on the screen where this is kind of taking place. As always, I'm a Western whole sign astrologer today. I use Placidus in my private practice. If you use Placidus, that's cool too. But for whole sign, you want to listen to your rising, your sun, and then your moon. If you're a Placidus user, you want to be looking at where 8 to 10 degrees of Gemini, Scorpio, and Capricorn are. It could be in a different house, that's all. But yeah, look at your guys' chart so you can identify where these are now. And that's going to give you a fuller picture. And listen for your rising, sun, and moon sign. All right, so let's go ahead and get into Aries and Aries rising. A lot of what I said applies to you. I guess I should also say this is important, primarily because Mars rules your chart. Computer's dying on me, guys, sorry. So Mars rules your chart, Aries, okay? Mars rules your first house. Mars rules your 8th house. The first house is like the body and it's you, so where Mars goes is what you're doing. The 8th house is joint resources, death, sex, taxes, change, other people, okay? But the area where Mars has been retrograding has been in your 3rd. Now, when we look at the quincunx that's setting up, that's forming that yod, Mars is the focal point between Mercury, the south node, and Mars in the 3rd house. So what does that mean, right? There's push back and forth between Mercury and Mars for all 12 signs. But Mars is saying, you know what? Now I'm ready to say something, or now I'm really willing to speak up, or I'm really ready to move forward when it comes to 3rd house topics. My advice for you with this aspect is have the conversation, even if it's uncomfortable. Likely there's some kind of uncomfortable conversation you have to have, a phone call that you get that you don't want to like call back, a confrontational email. Maybe you have to have a difficult conversation with a sibling or with a neighbor about responsibility. Maybe you are really pushing to have a negotiation at work and be, asking for, a raise or more resources or bonuses or, getting more back for what it is that you're doing. Regardless of what's going on right now, just like push forward, have the conversation, get it in writing, right? Have the documents, focus on documents. And this can also be about court documents. This can be about insurance related documents. It can be conversations you're having with partners about joint resources, being like, hey, am I going to pay this? Are you going to pay this? Like, can we talk about what direction we're going in with, what money we owe? Like something like that's kind of coming up right now. And where there's an uncomfortable conversation, lean into it because it has the opportunity to help you kind of get your groove back. Okay. Good luck, my Aries. For Taurus and Taurus rising, we're taking a look at this inconjunct between Mars and Mercury, okay? So here's Mars in your 2nd house. It's been retrograde, reworking your resources and your self-esteem. It might feel like money's been a little bit tighter, or you've been focusing on spending less or eating less, or you've been kind of dropping and detaching from people, perhaps. Mars rules your 7th house of relationships. So if you're married, your spouse, it can be your clients, your business partners, all of that stuff. And Mars also rules your 12th house, okay, of what's hidden and subconscious. Now, Mars has been an inconjunct to Mercury and also the south node. For you, this is about changing your beliefs around values and other people, right? So it can mean that you're like, you know what? I don't feel like I need to, collect partners anymore. I'm not as physically attached to another person or attracted to another person. It can also mean that you're just changing your philosophy. The inconjunct is changing your philosophy about money. It may mean that it's having to cost you money to separate from a particular other person. So if you're trying to get out of a marriage, trying to get out of a business relationship, a working partnership, there is some sense of being like, oh, you know, like, how do we do this? Because we are either financially or professionally intertwined. There can also be a sense for you where there's like a realizing the bigger picture when it comes to relationships, your goals, or perhaps even your children, because Mercury is involved and Mercury rules your 5th house. But yeah, really changing your belief around values and other people is kind of the vibe that I'm getting. And I feel like Mars waking up, putting the pressure on these placements is really pushing you to kind of really align with what you do value, what you do possess, who or what it is that you do want, okay? Good luck, my Tauruses. Gemini and Gemini rising, this is an interesting one for you. This is important because it is involving Mars in your sign. We have got Mars that's in your 1st house. It's waking up, so like you're gonna get your groove back, your sex drive might come back, you're gonna be feeling more active. You may be feeling a lot more aggressive or frustrated, or just like you have more excess energy to burn. Mars is quincunx Mercury, which rules your chart. So doubly interesting because you've got Mars in the 1st house, which traditionally is connected to Mercury, and it's in conjunct. Now for you, Mars rules your goals. Mars also rules your daily routine, your habits, and your workspace. So to me, it seems like you're really adamant about communicating and talking about what you want to change when it comes to your health, or what you want to change when it comes to your habits. It can mean like, I want to, you know, start being more active, or I want to run more, or I want to go kickboxing, or I want to change something about, you know, my physical appearance, right? I want to let go of a bad habit. I want to embrace change. And maybe you're looking at using 8th house ways of doing it. It could be surgery. Maybe you're making a decision about a surgery. Maybe you're making a decision about what you're investing in, or maybe it's a detox. The list goes on. But I think for the most part, it's about really coming to terms with being ready to express your goals, being able to also deal with frustration, and openly making change, right? If something bothers you, then change it. That's the advice that I would give you with this in conjunct. Like usually whatever's frustrating you here is coming up to show you like it needs to be cleared. And it can mean that you're frustrated with your own habits, but it can also mean that you're having health-related issues, and it's showing you that it's because of anger, resentment, frustration that you're holding on to, right? So think about that. 8th house can be great for therapy, right? So it can help you have like a release and have an outlet for that. Good luck. For Cancer and Cancer risings, welcome to Mars in conjunct Mercury and the South Node. Mars has been going retrograde in your 12th house. You guys have been hiding out a little bit, focusing on spiritual healing, reevaluating what direction you're going on with your career. The list goes on. Mars, quincunx the South Node, quincunx Mercury, right? Mars is about your career. It's also about what you love, your passions, right? Creativity, responsibility, sometimes for children. I could see that coming through here, or about your own happiness, realizing you're responsible for your own happiness. I like the sound of that. It's in conjunct Mercury, which rules your 12th house. And so I think that really internal frustrations revolving around whether or not you feel like you have control in relationships. You know, there's some anxiousness, some tension, some worry about what other people think. Mercury retrograde in your 7th, what they're going to say, what they're going to do. I'm going to call them. Are they going to answer? You know, they want to get together. What are they going to say? There is this sense of like that anxiety kind of coming out. And I think it's about not letting fear hold you back. That's really kind of the vibe that I'm getting, is like not allowing that to hold you back. I also think it's about like willingly letting go of old careers, Mars in the 12th, and embracing, you know, the opportunity to say, I don't know what direction I'm going in. You know, maybe I do need to get a reading. Maybe I do need a therapist. Maybe I do need a career coach. Maybe I do need to reach out to others and like let them know, you know, because Mercury rules your 3rd as well. What's on your mind, what you're thinking, and where you've been in the process of kind of taking a step back. Willingly let those old careers go though. You know, don't let fear hold you back. And there can be really insightful conversations with people as a result of this aspect that's setting up. Good luck. We've got Leo and Leo rising. What's going on, Leo? We're taking a look at Mars. in conjunct Mercury. So Mars is in your 11th house. It's waking up this week. It's all about kind of getting you back online socially, really focusing on your goals and going out there and spending time with friends, especially if you feel like you haven't had time to socialize. Maybe you had a falling out with a friend. Maybe you're reevaluating your goals when it comes to travel or education because Mars rules your 9th house. So you're like, maybe I go back to school, maybe I don't. Oh, my friend, you know, I had a conversation with my friend and they convinced me, like, do it. They push you, right, to go, okay, this is what I do or do not believe in. Now, Mars is in conjunct Mercury, which is the ruler of your 2nd house of money and resources. It's also the ruler of your 11th house of friendships. And it's forming a yod here with Mars being the focal point. My advice for you is to really pay attention to who shows up and incentivizes you and pushes you to achieve your goals. Friends have a lot to offer. Call a friend if you're in need, especially because Mars is in conjunct Mercury. So I feel like if you need work, if you're having a health related issue and you need some support, if you're looking for, you know, a good recommendation for, you know, a health club or a trainer or somebody who can kind of help you just get organized with your daily routine, somebody's going to be like, yes, I know someone, right? I think it's interesting that it also sextiles your south node. So if it's like, if you're needing assistance with moving, fixing something in your home, something like that, a friend might actually have like the perfect recommendation to help you remedy that situation. Okay, so friends have a lot to offer. Reach out to somebody, they're going to support you. For Virgo and Virgo rising, we've got Mars that's now going direct in the sign of Gemini. I'm sure you're very happy. It's been a really wild retrograde. And we see this yod that's setting up where we have a sextile between Mercury, which rules your chart, so this is important, and the south node. So Mercury's been going retrograde in your 5th house where there's been some changes of the heart. Maybe you're like, I love this, I don't love this, I want to date this person, I don't want to date this person, I'm going to participate in this hobby, I'm not going to do this thing. You're really trying to kind of figure out what's going to make you happy and what's going to make your heart sing. Mercury also rules your 10th house of career. So on one hand, it's a lot of like Virgos thinking about self-employment and whether or not they can swing it or if they can turn like a hobby or a hustle into like a full-time thing. For others, it's reevaluating dating or reevaluating responsibility when it comes to children, because the 5th house is children. And I think that that's possible. It's like, are you taking responsibility for your own happiness? That's a question that I have for you, Virgo. Being that Mars is in your 10th house, it's in conjunct the south node, so there's pressure to emotionally or mentally, I should say, be open to being like, I'm done here. So if you've been on the fence about quitting your job or, you know, resignation or going back to school, likely this going direct in itself is going to help you make up your mind. But as your chart ruler, Mercury is in conjunct Mars, forming this yod, it's bringing all the attention to Mars in your 10th, which is acting assertively, showing up, you know, being competitive, going after the job, launching things, the list goes on. Looking at this, Virgo, I feel like telling you like change is knocking, like it's inevitable. Mars rules your 8th house of other people's resources. Yes, can this materialize for some Virgo risings? Is like they're cutting people at work because there's financial issues, and then you're like, well, now what do I do? Now I have more time to focus on what I love to do. That's the silver lining. For other people, it's just reevaluating a complete makeover at work in general. But because Mars is the focal point and it rules your 8th of change and transformation in other people are pushing you and pushing your buttons, trying to see if you're gonna like stand up and like make a change. So be open, like literally like listen to your heart space, what your heart is telling you, if it's time to like quit and kind of move on to the next thing, if it's time to move on to the next person, if you feel like you're not making headway in a romantic relationship and you're like, you know what, this isn't enough for me, or this person doesn't want to go public with this relationship, you're like, I'm going to be the one to cut it. That can happen with this transit. Good luck. For Libra and Libra rising, we're taking a look at Mercury's retrograde in conjunct to Mars in Gemini. Mercury sextile your south node. Okay, so you're reorganizing things in regards to your private life, your home, your kitchen, you're selling houses, buying houses, organizing, putting things together, you know, possibly thinking about how you could have a change within the home space. Possibly also dealing with matters relating to family. Changes and transformations with family, releasing and letting go of the past. I say this because Mercury rules your 12th house. There we go. Mercury is quincunx Mars. So this forms a sextile. So the south node in the second to the 4th house. So you're releasing and letting go of things. You're not focusing on holding on to objects, not focusing too much on money. And this sextile is forming a yod to Gemini. So Mars is the focal point. You know, interesting for a lot of like Libra risings. I've seen this as like, I want to relocate to another country, but am I going to have enough money? I, want to get out of this period of just working just to make money. Do I go back to school? Because of that focus on Mars in the 9th. So a lot of you guys are questioning, like, can I make money through education? Can I make money through traveling? Can I remedy something in terms of my belief system? Education, travel, or publishing opportunities are very possible, actually. Especially with Mars coming online. And, Mars rules your 7th house of relationships, and it also rules your 2nd house of resources. So it could be an online campaign. It could be courses. It could be something you're teaching. It could be something that you're thinking about writing. You have to talk it over with like another person, a romantic partner, a spouse, a business partner, something here about getting feedback from other people about the bigger picture and like weighing the options as to whether or not it's going to impact your home or your family or your finances to the point where, you should or you shouldn't do it. But I think Mars going direct in your 9th is like, yes, it's time to kind of do this thing. Even if it does kind of disrupt a little bit of what's going on with the home, or maybe you have to move or make some changes in just the systems in regards to your home and your family. Okay. Good luck, Libra. All right. So this is for Scorpio and Scorpio rising. So we are taking a look at Mercury's inconjunct with Mars. Both of these planets are getting ready to come online. Right around the time you're watching this, Mars is getting ready to go direct, or it's going direct. So yay, good for you, Scorpio risings. I'm sure you're stoked for that. Mars rules your 1st house of your body, okay? And Mars also rules your 6th house of your habits and daily routines and systems. So it's interesting because when we look at this, we've got Mercury sextile the south node. So Mercury's been going retrograde through your 3rd, really focusing on reflecting, reworking on your communication style, working through documents, communication, making a decision about a move or a vehicle, and just figuring out your goals, because Mercury rules your 11th house of goals and friendships and your 8th house of joint resources or transformation. So there's been lots of talk about how can I change? How can I also learn more about skills? There's like a lot of hand-eye coordination stuff that happens here. So maybe learning more about like gadgets and apps and things like that. And Mercury is sextile the south node, and it's creating a inconjunct or a quincunx, forming a yod to Mars in the 8th. So Mars is the focal point here. Real potent for you, Scorpio rising, similar to Aries risings. You guys have a lot going on with this going direct. Personally, I got to tell you, I think the Mercury retrograde has been about this a lot. It's about how do you change and transform and like practice intimacy or gaining close, getting closer and like letting other people in on how you think or what you're thinking. But with this particular yod that's setting up, putting Mars now direct in the 8th house, I mean, I think it's about letting go of negative thinking, letting go of like negative communication patterns, always assuming the worst or jumping to conclusions or getting angry or getting frustrated. And with Mercury, that's putting the pressure on Mars. It's basically saying, yes, you have goals, but goals can't be so intense that you're finding yourself kind of getting short-tempered or frustrated, especially with delays. There's probably been like lots of challenges in communication or issues with siblings or even like delays with contracts, especially involving joint money and resources. But Mars now is opening everything up, allowing you to totally change and transform the way that you think and learning not to communicate from a fear-based place, okay? So important because it's going to have a much better impact on your health because Mars rules your 1st house, particularly like mental health, physical health as well. And I think it's also teaching you like how to use frustration or anger as fuel to get to where you want to go and to embrace change. Okay. Good luck, my Scorpios. For Sag and Sag rising, we're taking a look at Mercury coming into an inconjunct with Mars in Gemini throughout this next week or so. So it's going to be setting up here. It's going to be here for an extended period of time. So Sag risings, really pay attention to what's going on here. For you, this is about becoming more financially stronger, realizing that 2 is better than 1, that there's like a lot of support when it comes to you and your clients, you and your spouse, you and your business partner. We've got Mercury in your 2nd that's been retrograding, reworking your resources, reworking your money and your values. Mercury rules your 10th house of career. It also rules your 7th house of relationships. So as Mercury is sextiling the South Node, you're airing out some of your subconscious fears about money. Or maybe you're focusing more on using your intuition when it comes to like managing money and investments. And that's going to quincunx Mars forming a yod in your 7th house in Gemini. So this is really going to shine a light on the Mars retrograde for you, Sagittarius. It's really going to be showing you like where Mars is the focal point, right? So others' actions, others' desires, others' needs is really putting the pressure on you to really focus on getting stronger financially and also being more business minded. And also that through these frustrations, it gives you the opportunity to really work out and develop what your values are and like what you find important, and finding ways to communicate that better when it comes to your partners, your clients, and also romantic partners, especially for those of you guys that are married. Mars also rules your 5th house of children, right? And the 12th house of subconscious fear. So there can be this conversation that's going on between you and partners about, are we in love? Are we gonna, be together? Are we having enough fun? Is there enough romance? Are we gonna have children? That's really kind of bringing the heat to Mercury and also the South Node. And it's through relationships having you reflect a lot more on whether or not you're willing to do the work in the relationship and step up and maybe even possibly take responsibility more so physically. So, joining together with finances and other things within a relationship. Good luck. We got Capricorn and Capricorn rising. We are taking a look at Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, and it's in conjunct to Mars. Okay, so Mars is going to be the focal point here. All right, so we've got Mercury retrograde in your sign. You've been reworking just everything, your health, how you communicate, how you're working, restructuring your schedule, the list goes on. That's because Mercury rules your 6th house of habits and coworkers and daily routine, and also the 9th house, which deals with travel, your philosophy, your belief system, and anything in regards to higher education. So some of you guys through this in conjunct to Mars have been like, my schedule is changing. I've got stuff going on. I'm trying to find work. I'm changing jobs. I got to be with family. I might have to go back home. I say that also because Jupiter is here. And Mercury in your 1st house is about your communication style, but it can also be about like your mental health or just your ability to kind of like be checked in right now. Mercury rules, like I said, your 6th house. So as it's coming into quincunx with Mars in your 6th house, these 2 energies are kind of fighting each other a little bit. Mars rules your friendships and also your networks and anything in regards to your goals, and your 4th house in regards to home. So to me, it seems like you're like, okay, I'm having to focus on home and domestic matters. It's irritating. Maybe there's some stuff that's going on with the home and the family that's affecting your schedule. Maybe it's also impacting your health in some capacity. But Mars is the focal point of this yod, right? So we take into consideration, having to tell some friends, hey, I got to reschedule, having to kind of cut back on some of your goals, not always being able to go out and do things with other people, maybe because you're focusing on healthier lifestyles, maybe because you've just got a lot going on. But Mars being the ruler of the 4th house, simple solution, being at home, visiting family, working out from home, reorganizing or structuring your home, you have to get some of this stuff in order before you can really feel like you're finally kind of getting things together. So, you know, beliefs about your body changing, beliefs about your routines changing, and you may see opportunities also to focus more on being of service or being active in helping take care of someone or something, whether it's, you know, a parent who's ill, taking care of an animal, adopting a houseplant, you know, whatever, learning to nurture and kind of take care of something on your day-to-day, and also just really remedying any issues that you're potentially having with your body or your health, okay? And now we've got Aquarius and Aquarius rising. We are taking a look at Mars and Mercury's in conjunct to one another and the yod that it's forming. So we've got Mercury, it's been going retrograde in your 12th house. It's been kind of hidden, subconscious, lots of dream stuff, being in your head, needing your space, dealing with combating fear, right? Endings, loss, grief, financial challenges, changes even with your job. Mercury is in a sextile to the South Node, so I think that's part of this. And what you do or do not have control over, right? So Mercury rules your 5th house of love, children, creativity. It also rules your 8th house, which deals with endings, releasing, letting go, you know, other people's resources. So as we see Mercury go through the 12th house, there can be more stress about investments. There can be more stress about kids. There can be more stress about paying off bills. These things can happen. But Mercury and the South Node are in a sextile, forming this yod to Mars in your 5th. So, you know, Mars in the 5th house in Gemini is taking the energy of your 3rd of communication and also your 10th house of career and bringing it into the 5th. So what is it saying? To get out of this funk, to also release and kind of blow off steam from what's going on with your work responsibilities, there is a need to like creatively write, dance, go on a short trip, focus on social media, journal, having fun. Mars in the 5th house is a great transit. Even though it's been retrograde, I think this is where you're realizing that certain things are maybe changing for you professionally, or certain things are changing for you. And you're having to kind of embrace change. And if you are a parent, it can involve some difficult parenting things, but also, you know, just being more open creatively, taking chances and opportunities to focus on self-expression and maybe even self-employment. For some of you guys, big risk can also be big reward, because we've got Mercury in the 12th, which is about money owed, that's pressuring Mars, and Mars is saying, no, I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to publish that, you know, YouTube channel. I'm going to write that book. I'm going to teach that class. I'm going to go on this trip. And it may end up being something that is actually very productive. So you get a little bit of like an easier run with some of these aspects. Good luck, Aquarius. And for Pisces and Pisces rising, we're taking a look at the Mercury retrograde, or the Mercury in Capricorn in conjunct quincunx Mars, okay? So in your astrology, Mercury's been going retrograde in your 11th house, rethinking your goals, your friendships, and your associations. Yes, there can be miscommunication with friends. Yes, there can be people coming back from the past, or just reevaluating some of your professional goals. Mercury also rules your relationships. So reevaluating what's going on with my relationship, who can I rely on, who am I working with, who can I call on when I need a job, I need support, or I need some love. Mercury also rules the 4th house of home and family. So some of you guys have been dealing with situations where you're back and forth with a relationship, or a partner's moving in or moving out, or they're kind of like back and forth a little bit. Can also be about airing out some issues with relatives. Now, Mercury is sextiling the South Node, so there's like a lot of support to detox and kind of declutter and clear. So maybe you've learned a lot of lessons about relationships, friendships, or networking. And now Mars is going to receive that in conjunct from both the South Node and Mercury. So it's really reinforcing Mars in your 4th. Lots of not feeling comfortable at home, arguments with family, kind of moving several times, you know, feeling anxious, like you need out of the house. But there's been either delays with buying a place, or getting a place finished, or moving to a place, or there's been some indecisiveness recently. I think what's great is that it seems like friends or other people step in to kind of help you figure out your goals. And a lot of this is because Mars is in your 4th and it's in conjunct Mercury. And Mars in the 4th house has you wanting to commit to like living in one place. But like I said, you've had to keep your options open. Mars rules your 2nd house of money and ownership and your 9th house of vision. It can be about education. It can be travel. So I feel like there's been this sense of being like, I want to move to this place, but I'm not ready, but I need to save money. And like, I'm holding back, or I really can't stay here anymore. I don't know where I'm going to go. You may have a friend who offers some kind of support. You may have a friend that kind of gives you some insight, or they, you know, talk to you about like just finally making a decision and like saying like, hey, you know, get with it, just take the chance, you know, go and live there for a couple of months, see if you like it. They may even say to you, hey, you know what, if you need a place to crash, if you need somewhere to stay, come and stay with me. And people who are offering you some kind of support in some way. What I like also is that Mars rules your 2nd house. So it's to kind of help get you more stable when it comes to your living situation. It could be to help you afford buying a house, to help you find a home, to help you decorate a space, to acquire like land. There's a lot of different ways that this can kind of play out for you, but I think some of you guys might need to call in a favor to somebody and say, hey, can I crash on your couch? Or do you have any recommendations for, you know, real estate agents? Or I want to come and feel that city out. Can I stay with you first and see if I like it? Be willing to ask for help, because other people are going to help step in and make you more so aware of your goals, even if it's in other places. One other way I can look at this is also if you're needing some legal advice or some legal support, or if you're needing anything in regards to like visas and documentation and travel, you might be able to connect with somebody or a group that can kind of help you facilitate and make this happen. All right, guys, that's it for me for today. Enough lecturing for me. Let me know, how are you feeling with these energies? What do you think about the Mars and Mercury in conjunct the quincunx? Let's see what plays out over the next like week or two. I'm curious to see like what big happenings are taking place, and where both Mercury and Mars are really having their voice heard. So don't forget to make sure you click the button below. You're subscribed if you like my content. There's going to be more coming out each week. And we do live readings on the weekends, and we're going to be teaching astrology classes here on January the 22nd, 8 consecutive Sundays. We're going to be teaching transits. So if you like my style, if you want to learn with me, go to my website, go to my classes. You can see Astro 201 is going to be popping up soon. You can sign up for that. There's still some time. We have a beginner's Astro course as well. And if you want to book a personal reading with me, you can if you go to my website at beyondtheveiltarot.com. Until next time, I will see all of you guys very soon, and take care. Enjoy the rest of your week.